All right, good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am Oladipo, and welcome to BCA Chat Dubai. The world that we live in today is a very disruptive and innovative world. And today, ladies and gentlemen, we have with us a very special guest. He is a professor of strategy, innovation, and economics. As a matter of fact, he is the founder and CEO of Cambrian Ventures. Ladies and gentlemen, he has co-authored his first book titled Solomon's Code, Humanity in a World of Thinking Machines. And he is on course in launching his second book titled The Great Remobilization. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Olaf Groth. Please put your jamming hands together for him. Of course, at the same time, I would like to introduce my other guest on the show who we collaborated on this beautiful event today. He is the president of HULTERPRENEURS and an MBA student here in HULT International Business School. Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome Mr. Parikshit. Dr. Olaf, it's so great to have you today. Tell us how you're feeling today. Thank you so much for answering us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. It's always fun to teach in Dubai, and especially on the HULT campus. I'm feeling good today. It's been a 2-week run, and it's been a good time with lots of good engagement with students and clients in the broader network. So I'm pumped to be here.
Absolutely, that feels so great. So tell us about your journey. I know you started your career as far back as 1991 when you started economics and trade. So tell us how it's progressed, for you and even globally. How do you think since 1991 to your date in 2022? What would you say the journey has been for you and for the world generally?
Well, it's been a really rich journey, and I'm very grateful for it. Right, like everything in life, it's had its ups and downs and its twists and turns, and some of these were planned, and some of these were just life happening while you make other plans, as they say. Right, and so I started my career right out of my PhD program in the corporate sector. So I got a PhD, but ended up not in consulting or government or academia at first, but rather went into the corporate sector, had a career there of about 15 years or so, and then was recruited by a consultancy, ended up spinning out, starting my own with one associate, and that has sort of blossomed into Cambrian Futures that you mentioned just a little while ago. And then along came one of my very good friends, John Beck, who said, you really ought to look at teaching, next to consulting. And I teach at this fantastic new business school called HULT, and there is nothing better since sliced bread. Absolutely. And that was 10 years ago, and here I am.
Absolutely, that sounds very, very amazing. So speaking about your first book, you wrote your first book about artificial intelligence, and the reviews are amazing because you touched on so many sectors and how artificial intelligence is affecting the public health, civil defense, and even people who are not in AI and tech were able to resonate with your book. Tell us what was it that you did or what you realized about the book when you co-authored, when you were writing this, and what do you think people are missing for those who may have not read the book? Why do you think they should go back and read this book?
Yeah, sure. Look, the book came out of a research initiative at HULT. As you know, all of us professors have to not just teach, but also research, contribute to the knowledge base of the broader global community. And so I was diving into hot and heavy into AI and data science and automation and autonomous vehicles and all that good stuff that we talk about so much today. And then found that there's a lot of hype. Right? There's either a lot of hype by people in the media or in the general public that really don't understand what this is all about, but they latch on to sort of these science fiction visions that are promulgated by Hollywood, right? And that's entertainment, and that's kind of cool, and it's fun, but it's not where the real world is. Absolutely. And so then you have the opposite side of the road, which is all the people who really understand it, but don't know how to communicate where it's at, what's hype, what's real. And paint the broader context. So Solomon's Code, which was the name of the hardcover, been renamed for the paperback into the AI generation, is really about letting the audience see what the broader patterns are, who's doing what around the world, what are the key issues for us today and 10 years into the future, but not overhyping it with all kinds of science fiction visions of these super intelligent sentient beings of whatever it is 2100 that really have no relevance for us today, because that jades our view toward what's really happening. And there's a small revolution going on here, right?
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, you can look at AI even from an economical perspective as well, and tell us more about how you can actually link, the economic revolution attached to AI with your research and your experience.
Well, I mean, if you talk top down, right, there is something like $17 trillion potential over the next, I believe, 10 years or so in increased GDP to be had. Most of that is going to be accruing in the United States and China, to much lesser degree or to somewhat lesser degree in Europe, and frankly, to much lesser degree in places like Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America. And so there is a lot to be gained, but it is very selectively gained around the world. And it's incumbent upon us as entrepreneurs, as Hult-style business executives and strategists and consultants, to change that and make sure that people in Africa, people in the Middle East are benefiting from all of this. And in fact, we are teaching not just here, but also in Africa to spread the word.
Absolutely, absolutely. There was something you mentioned in Solomon's Code as well about the revolutions in AI in Africa, in Nigeria, in Israel. Some countries are already adapting into this development. Tell us more about AI and healthcare. Do you think there's something we should be worried about, or do you think it's coming for a good cause?
Well, I think frankly, the potential for AI in healthcare is vast, right? Because AI has proven to have significant improvement effects on things like radiology, discovering tumors, for instance, in combination with the human doctor, making the human doctor, the judgment capability of the human doctor, much better. So the potential, not just in radiology, but in all kinds of medicine and healthcare, including pharmaceuticals, for instance, right? The discovery of new chemical compounds, molecules that knowledge can then be, transposed into new types of medications. So again, vast potential. Genomics, for instance, genetic engineering would be nothing without artificial intelligence to help sort through things. And so the potential is, like I said, vast. But the pitfall is that we need to govern artificial intelligence, right? We need to understand what can it do, what can't it do, where are the fringes of what it can do, and where does the human need to be in the loop, and how do we regulate and govern all of this without killing the potential, right? There are some regions around the world that are very strong on proactively, regulating risk. And that serves the protection of the individual human being, and that's appreciated in terms of the sentiment. But it is also a risk of just, over-regulating it too quickly and destroying its potential. And so we need to be very careful. But the potential is there if we shape it. And the operative word is really if we shape and design it proactively and don't just run after the low-hanging fruit and the easy money.
Absolutely. I don't think can ever be better said than this. It has to be regulated, and we have to apply the right tools and the right equipment into the right direction. So we're going to move into your second book, and I'm just going to jump over to my co-host seated right beside you, Mr. Parikshit. And let's talk about the second book. Would you like to engage?
Professor, now we heard that you are writing another book with Professor Mark, right? Everyone's aware of. So we would want to know or get a sneak peek into what can we expect in the next book.
I'd be happy to give it to you, but first of all, I can't sit next to this guy again because he's dressed much more sharply than I am. So you can't keep upstaging me like this.
Thank you.
And your question is right on. And of course, if I may correct you a little bit, of course it's Mark, but also Terence Say. We sort of jokingly say the Three Musketeers because we like each other a lot. We collaborate a lot. We teach in maybe not exactly the same ways, but there's some overlap between us, and so yes, that's the trio, assisted by Dan Zayer, who is an award-winning journalist out of Texas in the United States, with whom I also incidentally wrote Solomon's Code. And so this next book is called The Great Remobilization, because we have seen, obviously, a lot of things being thrown up in the air through, sort of seen through the lens of COVID, right, of the pandemic. But there's a lot of disruption there that was already in the making or that got caused that could swing either in a bad way or in a good way, right? So the pandemic itself is of course, an excellent example. We've had a lot of disruption to people's personal health. to healthcare systems and to business models, right? Like, I mean, just look at the disruption that, luckily we've weathered really well in education here at HULT, but a lot of institutions are struggling, right? So likewise, there are a lot of areas in which this disruption is happening, and we call those areas the 6 Cs. There is starting with COVID, right? The management, the science, the international cooperation. Then there is the cognitive economy. So that's anything from the future of work, the global data economy, and then there is crypto. There is cybersecurity. There is climate change and carbon or decarbonization, and then finally China, because nothing will work without China in the global economy, without some kind of interaction with China, right? Because China is a global innovation power, and it's 1.4 billion people, right? So we examine all these tectonic shifts, these disruptions, and we say, okay, now what do we do with this? And as strategic executives and visionaries and capacity builders, we feel like we want to equip both younger and older, accomplished decision makers with a vision, right? And say, look, if we don't develop a vision as to what we want the world of, let's say, 2030, 2035 to look like with all this disruption up in the air, then, if we don't want to be surprised, then let's just paint a vision, right? There is no better way to shape the future than have a vision of what it should be. And so we're outlining some elements there, and then we're giving the people a strategic framework on how to navigate that path, right? Both in terms of the strategic steps, the analytical steps, but also in terms of leadership technique, right? Because in this day and age, strategy is only as good as the communication, the leadership that drives it forward, right? And that's our Flip It framework on the back end. So that's essentially the book, right? Making sense of this chaos and helping us design a smarter world. And needless to say, most people in this room are digitally native, right? Digital will loom large. But what we're saying is it's not just digital. It's really, digital transformation is really a 2010 term. And that's not to say that people shouldn't be digitally transforming, but really the avant-garde of innovators are going a clear step forward. We're talking about cognification. And this is getting us back to AI, right? But also things like quantum computing, brain-computer interfaces, the Internet of Everything, where we are essentially dealing with the automation of thought processes, of decisions, of pattern recognition, of recommendations. And so we need to put that into things like supply chain, decarbonization, and all these problem areas, and design smarter ways of doing things, right? And that's what the book is eventually about. It's a book for what we call the design activist leader, because we believe that all of you here in the room and our listeners need to become more activist and much more design focused in how we look at the future.
Wow.
So is that a mouthful? Yeah. See, I wouldn't be a good professor if I didn't know how to, that's why you paid me, right?
To be fair, I got stuck on my next words. Do you have any more questions?
Yes. Okay. So what do you think? Now, the research that you're conducting, is it well accepted by governments across the world? Are they able to understand the efficiency and the importance of AI?
So governments around the world, I think, do clearly understand the potential. And they do understand the mandate. They're not always acting. I can tell you here in the United Arab Emirates, from firsthand experience dealing with government decision makers on senior levels, they're very aware, not just of AI, but also the growing global data economy. They're trying to be avant-garde on things like crypto and blockchain. And there are select countries around the world, of course, first and foremost, what we call the Cambrian countries, right? The countries that are driving this exploration or explosion, I should say, of opportunity, United States and China. But there are, like UAE, other countries like Finland, for instance. The UK is a big innovator in this. Israel, Canada, places like Canada, right? Who would have thought? Because they're actually very foresightful in how they connect scientists and entrepreneurs and a little capital here and there to create global networks. Places like Singapore, I may have mentioned South Korea. So there are avant-garde governments and leading thinkers in those governments, but it is not a homogeneous picture. And again, we're trying to help Africa along. Africa has amazing digital talent. You would know this, right?
Absolutely.
And literally, you go to Lagos, there's tons of digital, Kenya, Ethiopia, all over the place. And that talent is, of course, now being accessed by global platforms with their global algorithms, with their global compute power, all driven by designs in the United States and in China. And what we're saying is that's okay, and that's good, because you got to equip people to work on the right tools, the right algorithms. But at some point, Africa needs to develop its own approaches, and that needs to be governed by its own value systems, right, rather than those dictated by the United States and China. And so what does that look like? And so it's not a homogeneous picture around the world, right? When you look at the map, Africa, in terms of governance, is still very much a white space, right? And the same with Latin America, and that should not be happening.
Absolutely. Let me ask, how long do you think it will take countries to adapt to the idea of smarter cities and decarbonization in the most sustainable way possible? How long do you think countries are going to catch up to that?
Yeah, that's a really big question, right? Thanks a lot for that. So we of course we tackle it in the book, and when you look at what happened in Glasgow, right, around climate change mitigation. The experts are saying there were some rays of hope there. There are some very innovative new arrangements, for instance, with South Africa, helped by the United States and other countries. So there are some rays of hope. But overall, I think the general expert community is saying we're still under our full potential here in terms of the change that we could effect. And in fact, what I'm hearing more and more is that the private sector needs to step in, and the private sector wants to step in, because the one thing the private sector doesn't like is risk and uncertainty of governments not acting.
Sure.
And so from that perspective, I do believe that we will see lots of tech innovation. It cannot happen without some regulatory help, and we'll have to see. Smart cities, to me, are the nexus, in fact, and I'm glad you're mentioning it, of where that change is going to be springing about first, right? Because places like Dubai, like San Francisco, where I live, like Berlin, much less mega cities like Mexico City or Shanghai, for instance, or Lagos, right? That's where the friction is. That's where the tension is. That's where people are starting to cough because the air quality is so bad. And then you get dissatisfaction, you get frustration. And out of frustration is innovation is born, right? There is no innovation without some kind of tension. We shouldn't forget that, right?
Absolutely.
Perfect harmony does not yield innovation. And so I do have hope that the administrators, the local city managers, the mayors, that they will get together and say, look, I want the cutting edge companies from the UAE, from Germany, to come to San Francisco or to come to London or wherever, or Lagos, right, or Nairobi, for instance, right, and help us develop solutions here. And from there, things will spread. That's my great hope. Now, I will tell you that it's our conviction, we say this in the book, that this will not happen unless we can automate the logging of carbon in supply chains or value chains. Okay, and that will only happen through blockchain or blockchain-like ledger technologies. And we need to be able to track which products, which services have what kind of carbon footprint. Then assess pricing, and that is done very imperfectly today with cap and trade. A lot of countries are, they shouldn't be, but they are hesitant when it comes to carbon taxes. And so we need to create a carbon market in which we can actually sell the carbon. Because carbon itself is not a bad element, right? We need it. We are made of carbon. Yeah. It's just up in the air with the ozone layer. That doesn't work, right? And so we need to recycle it on Earth, and that means you have to assess its value, assess a price. You all know this. You're business majors, right? And then let people bid for it and put it to better use. And that can only happen if we log it for every product and what better technology than blockchain-type technologies.
Oh, fantastic.
Right.
Do you want to take it?
Yeah. So again, coming back to AI. So Professor Mark once told us that AI is replacing repetitive jobs, which is causing a decline in job rate. So what do you feel like? How the next generation needs to think about job creation?
So, look, I mean, I think Mark's right. I do think that there could be a marginal decline of jobs, but I think the job threat is overhyped. Okay, and I think Mark would probably agree with this. Excuse me. So all these numbers of 40% of all jobs going away by whatever the number was, 2040, 2050. Is I think scaremongering, and I think the scientists I think they were out of Oxford, have since, I wouldn't say retracted, but have since said, look, that was a very simplistic sort of high-level cut at what we were thinking. We have refined our thinking. Now, these days, we're not looking at the job level of analysis, right? Because there is actually a lot more non-routine work in our daily jobs than you would imagine. But it's really down to the task level, right? There are certain tasks that you need to analyze that are very routine. Most people don't actually like them because they get boring, right? And unless you like a heavy dose of repetition every day, and there are some people who are just genetically designed such that they do really well with that, but the majority of people don't. They get bored, they get frustrated, and they leave their jobs, right? So that portion, and I think the McKinsey number is assessed it at, something like 30% of 30% of all tasks in something like 40%, or maybe it was 60% of all job categories, right? So that means there is significant disruption within many job categories. And then the challenge becomes not do I fire all these people and bring machines in, although there is a threat to that, because if you can consolidate, let's say 3 professors, right, that or 4, however many, at 25%, each, right, you can let one go, okay? But I think before we get there, I think most organizations will design new jobs, right? Professors like me will learn how to, and have been learning, in fact, and we at Cambrian and at HULT are at the forefront of this, how to redesign and reconceive your teaching job, your research job with AI, with data science, but in such a way that elevates my role as a human in combination with that automated algorithm or machine, okay? And I think that's what we need to do. We need to upskill people, we need to train people, we need to give them time, and we need to start designing these new jobs now.
Absolutely.
And that's the problem. It's not that, we're going to see just all of a sudden, a snap of a finger, we're going to see all these unemployed people, but we are not acting fast enough in designing the jobs of the future. And we call those symbio-intelligent jobs. So from, the word symbiosis, which means it doesn't make any sense for me to compete with an algorithm or with an automated machine. I can't. The machine will always outcompete me, as has happened in chess, right? A good friend of mine is a chess grandmaster. He has said the era in which a human could ever beat a computer is over. I mean, that's as black and white as it is. But is that really what we want, right? Or should we aim at playing at a much higher plane of chess, which means a human chess grandmaster with an AlphaGo Zero or some such machine, right, as pairs playing against another pair? And he said his neck hair stands up when he watches these matches because they play at a much higher plane. They make moves that no chess grandmaster alone would ever think is feasible or make sense. But he said, literally, and it's in the book, it's like watching gods play.
Absolutely.
That is what we should be doing, right? We should be playing at a higher level of productivity, a higher level of imagination, a higher level of creativity, rather than competing and having this view. Like we as humans, and especially business people, we're guilty of this, right? We always say, gotta compete, right? Well, no, sometimes you need to integrate and partner. Absolutely. And that's the answer, right? Absolutely. And so that's what we mean by symbio-intelligence, and there are machine makers in Germany and the United States that are now looking at how does the machine, right, recognize the human operator, and how then can they both play at a higher level of productivity. That's the future.
Absolutely. So touching up further on the future of work. So of course, I'm very sure my fellow HULT students here know that the HULT Prize is on and people are brainstorming their ideas. And it's very perfect that you sort of mentioned this. Are there more tips that you would give out, while, people are brainstorming on their ideas for the future of work, that you think we should pay attention to while we're developing our ideas, if that's fine for you to disclose?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, you have to be very focused, right? As I teach courses in strategy and innovation, but also sort of entrepreneurship, right? And the entrepreneur, and I'm a partial entrepreneur myself, has to be focused on discrete problems, discrete challenges. If you're not focused on the challenge, if you don't define the challenge, you can be dreaming up all kinds of solutions that never find a market. Absolutely. In order to get to product market fit, you have to be very good at defining the problem, right? And then be very good at defining, at a certain level of specificity, the solution. So for the future of jobs, that means that you ought to look at the daily profile of a worker, whether that's in government or whether it's in a factory or whether, frankly, it's a white-collar worker, and frankly, with AI, all of us are at greater risk than the average factory worker, okay?
Absolutely.
Of not upskilling right away, right? So you have to literally look at the task profile of a worker every day at whatever level the worker is, okay? And that's a very ethnographic, design thinking kind of way of going about it, and get to a level of granularity. How routine are their tasks really, okay? And then how can the machine step to their side and maybe automate some of these tasks, free up the human to do something higher value add, right? And there's lots of that. Things like imagination, inspiration, mentoring, coaching, right? Managing, all of those things are negotiating, all of those things, even theory making and strategizing, machines can't do.
Absolutely.
What the machine does is high-speed calculation, right? And then say, okay, how can we automate some stuff, let the human do other things that are higher value add, right? Or have them play together so that the output is even higher, right? So you have to get to that granular level of design. And Mark Terrence and I are big fans of taking a design approach to your leadership, to your entrepreneurship, right? Make sure you get down to the level of design. That's the only way these things can work.
Absolutely. Wow, what a response, what a perfect answer. Do you have more questions for him?
No, because every time I'm just blank, to be honest, because Professor Olaf is, wow.
Yeah, it takes your breath away.
Lots to learn, and there's not a single topic where Professor would hesitate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so he's helping us upskill.
You guys are the wow because you're going to be building the future. We're just helping you along.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's give him a round of applause once again, please.
Thank you.
This is awesome. At this stage, we're going to come to you. I know you may have questions or further comments that you want to share, so this is the time for that. So we're just going to start with you then.
Sure. Thank you, Professor, firstly, for giving us this fascinating talk, I must say. If I may offer two questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Right? Sure. I wanted to firstly find out, you mentioned symbiote intelligence, which is particularly fascinating. And, we are all master's students some of us, MIT, about to enter the working world for the first time, MBAs. Knowing where the future is heading after you have done so much research, what are the skills, or maybe not even skills, but habits we should be getting into that you could tell us about that could help us, reach that level of symbiote intelligence, or help us along that path?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I love the specificity of it, okay? So first of all, you, of course, I have been emphasizing the human side of things, right? And I can come back to that. But first of all, let's be very clear. We all, no matter where you're from, what you do, how old you are, how accomplished you are, you have to learn a good bit about data science and about artificial intelligence, even if you're not technical. And it doesn't mean you have to be, super good at it, or you get fantastic grades, or whatever the performance metric is. But you have to understand who is doing what, why, and how, and then you want to shape it, right? So it's about understanding the different techniques and which decisions, which recommendations get made, and whether they rest on data that is clean and that is unbiased and that has been scrubbed, okay, and that the models are fitted the right way, okay, and that the target functions of these models are the target functions you want, okay, because that's really these target functions is really the intersection. It's like an API. The application, protocol interface, right? Between the human and the machine. You really have to understand, how do I work with that target function? Do I have to tweak the target function? Do I have to tweak the model in order to fit what I do best and then play at that higher level, okay? So you do have to get the STEM skills, and that includes data science and some basic knowledge on artificial intelligence and automated systems. But then you should focus on what the human is or should be innately really good at. And the truth be told, we're not always, right? So that is things like what I just mentioned, which is imagination, inspiration, right? Things like empathy, negotiating in an interest-based way, right? Recognizing that you may be my opponent on some level, but you have valid human needs. Right? I recognize you as a whole human being, and therefore, let's just figure this thing out. It's a problem. Let's fix the problem. Let's design a relationship. All of those things the machines can't do, and they won't be able to do for 20, 30 years, okay? They're working on emotive computing, but that's very different. That's a machine pretending to understand you, but of course the machine can't understand you because the machine didn't crawl out of the primordial slime 2.5 million years ago like we did, okay? It hasn't had our experience. That may, a la Blade Runner, change one day, right? But we're nowhere near that currently. So empathy, even things like Kai-Fu Lee says this in his book, right? And it sounds a bit schmaltzy, okay? But even things like love and affection, right? And then mentoring, coaching. I have friends who are SVPs, EVPs of human resources. They say coaching, mentoring are vastly under-leveraged leadership styles, right? Everybody wants the go-getter, alpha animal kind of leader, but that's only 1 out of 6, 7, 8, 10 different leadership styles, right? So what are you going to do to hone your interpersonal skills, your EQ, right? Curiosity, learning, proactively acquiring new knowledge. The machine doesn't do that. It does what you tell it to, research, right? And so those are all things that you should be honing. It's that intersection of learn enough of the hard stuff and hone your interpersonal skills, right? And ask yourself, am I really good at the interpersonal stuff? We all make mistakes. I make mistakes on a daily basis, right? And if you're, if your classmates don't point it out, your partner in life will point that out, right? And I know mine has plenty of times. And so you got to ask yourself, is every doctor you experience good with bedside manner? And the answer of most people is no. And then you ask yourself, why are they going into medicine? Well, maybe many people in medicine go into medicine because of the science. They like to figure things out. But talk to a human, right?
Yeah.
Or customer service representatives. How many times have we gotten frustrated with customer service reps? That's another human. Why can't they be EQ focused? Well, because we don't train them like that. We train them to be machines, right? But if we train them to be machines, we shouldn't be surprised when we displace them with machines, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You have another question?
Yes, if I may. Thank you for that answer. It was very insightful. I just wanted to ask again now, there's all these amazing technologies that are coming out, like the metaverse, DAOs, or AI. But if you look into it now, I think there's a lot of expectation around it. But if you look into it now, a lot of this stuff, maybe not AI to a certain extent, but a lot of the stuff like the metaverse, is still in its infant stage, in a sense.
Yeah.
So when we're looking into the future, what terms should we be thinking? 5 years, 10 years, to actually get a proper representation of what is coming? Because I think a lot of us expect something like the metaverse, that this should be like this, and we look at the pixelated images that are currently at the metaverse, and there still has to be a lot of work around that. What terms do you think we should be starting to think in with regards to all these new technologies?
Yeah. The metaverse is a fascinating phenomenon, right? That's being talked about, and I completely agree. It's hype at the moment, right? I mean, there's AR and there's VR and there's the cloud, and now we're trying to put both together and put the human in the middle, and then you have some avatar that represents you, and most of these are crappy little images at the moment, right? And then we see Mark Zuckerberg giving us this grand vision of what's possible eventually, and we know that we're probably 7, 8, 10 years away from that stuff, and of course, he says that too, right? And Elon Musk says the same thing with regard to brain-computer interfaces, which is a whole nother dimension, right? Where you don't even need to talk; you can just think things, and stuff moves, right? And all of that will take time. We are at a point now with the metaverse and with things like BCI, brain-computer brain-machine interfaces, where we were with the internet in 1991. Okay, where you essentially have these black screens with green blinking cursors on them, and you needed to type in single words, right? That's where we are. We have the vision of what it could be, but we're nowhere near that yet. I do believe it'd be a mistake to dismiss it. I think there is something here, and we've written about this in various magazines and journals, right? Amongst other things, with our very own Tobias Straube here, who's an executive MBA from HULT, right, where we talk about things like crypto and DAOs, right, and blockchain and decentralized finance are, of course, overhyped, right? Bitcoin is a great example, right? And it'd be a mistake to say, that's all crap, okay? And there are some very well-known pundits out there who are saying that's all a sham and just ignore it. Okay, I think that'd be a big mistake. I do believe that we are creating the foundations of a potentially more diffused system of transacting and of living life. That and at least that's what the push is for of those evangelists who want to make this happen. That sets us free from big institutions, rightly or wrongly, whether that's government or large corporations like the big hyperscaler platforms, and that are saying, look, why not go peer-to-peer? Why do I have to go through a Google or Facebook or whoever, Baidu, right, in order to be mediated and be beholden to their design power and their compute power and their data power? Why can't we engage in a more decentralized peer-to-peer paradigm and, by the way, also govern ourselves with tokens? Okay, so I think will that be sort of the utopian nirvana? Will it happen exactly this way? No, but the opposite of ignoring it and saying it's all bogus is equally wrong. We're going to get to a new balance between centralized and decentralized power in the global economy, right? We cannot underestimate the power, and we shouldn't, right? Because we want them to be in our lives, of the big platforms, okay? But if that's the only means to which we transact and live our lives, then that's also not good, right? So there's going to be a balance in different spheres of life where we need the global platforms for some stuff, and we will be more diffused and decentralized for other stuff. So watch that space, metaverse in general, because what we're doing now is we are taking the crypto stuff, the DeFi stuff, and we're sort of transposing these concepts into a virtual realm, and we're saying, let's create a new institutional framework. Okay, and governments will lean in and they'll say, hey, wait a minute, just because you're buying real estate in the metaverse doesn't mean you're not still in UAE, right? Sure. Yeah. And so there'll be that creative friction as we figure that out. But we've had the same in the internet, right? Just because we're on the internet doesn't mean local government doesn't mean anything anymore, right? So I see that bigger picture of new institutional frameworks. You have to figure out, as you're launching your businesses or you're managing projects or programs or teams in your employer organizations, how do I work here in the bricks and mortar reality, and at the same time deal with that parallel world up here? And where's the connectivity? And watch that connectivity and understand the opportunity and the risk of that, because government will lean in. Big platforms will try to dominate that, okay? Watch those intersections.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that response. All right, so, we'll take your question, sir.
Yes, thank you for, first of all, great presentation. And yes, so you mentioned that there's a need to nuance the approach of regulation of AI. And further, you also mentioned that we ought to be thoughtful about how we design the future. And so my question basically was, with all the potential that AI has, the potential to improve life, improve economies, it also has the potential to cause harm in the wrong hand. People can use it for malicious intent. We already seen that world leaders, deepfake world leaders, and other stuff like that. So, do you foresee if in the near future the tech world, when I say tech world, I mean the private sector regulating itself, or are we to expect governments to step in at some point? And if government steps in, do you believe it's going to be a worldwide effort to create a ethic code for the use of AI, or are we going to see a world where we're going to see movement or migration of capital on the basis of digital freedom?
Yeah, it's a great question. By the way, I love his mask, right? That blah, blah, blah mask. That should be standard equipment for every professor, right? But your question is another question right on the mark. So to be blunt, no, I don't believe that we can just rely on self-regulation. I do believe and I teach this in my courses here at HULT and elsewhere, that we need to have self-regulation. We need to have self-governance. We need to lead, right? We don't just lead with technologies and algorithms and applications and let them fall wherever they may, and then, to hell with all the side effects and externalities. We need to actually, no, we are going to do our part in monitoring that and being accountable and liaising with stakeholders to involve them in the design and control what's happening here. That needs to happen. But that alone is not enough. Look, everybody in life, in any domain, needs some kind of quote-unquote parental supervision, okay? Because left to your own devices, especially if you're powerful, like the global platforms, you're going to be driven by your primary motive, and that is, unfortunately, still shareholder value, okay? And quarterly results. I don't want that to design single-handedly the cognitive era, the new society, right? We got to have some rules of civility here and figure out we're not just data constructs and to be objectified and turned into advertising revenue. We actually want to use this technology to live better lives, richer lives, longer lives, right? Happier lives, right? For that, we do need government. So we do need government, and we have seen some good forays. They are also problematic, right? So a shining example is the European GDPR, the Global General Data Protection Regulation in the EU, which was a welcomed stake in the ground to say, hey, wait a minute, global innovators, the human counts. And we got to make sure that as you keep innovating, you pay some attention to this. But beyond that, it's, of course, creates cumbersome rules for especially small entrepreneurs who don't have money for expensive lawyers, who cannot afford to be slapped with large fines, right? So everything is now becoming much more cumbersome. Luckily, the EU has recognized that it needs to verticalize, or at least become a lot more specific and application or domain specific in its regulation, okay? Because treating an entrepreneur in healthcare the same way as you are treating an innovator in national defense in the military or in finance versus, let's say, retail or travel booking or whatever it may be, treating them all the same is not going to work, right? There are different sensibilities, sensitivities, and different risks and opportunities here. So we are now at this point where we said, okay, we got the complete laissez-faire approach, okay? We have which used to be the American way, okay? And we'll see government leaning in there, I'm convinced. We see in China, the government out of Beijing, very strong hand, yanking the chains of the global platforms there, the local platforms. And we've seen the third way on the part of Europe that puts the human in the center of all of this as the focal point. And we need to fine-tune that, right? And my big hope is that Europe and the United States will get together and figure this out because of overlapping value systems, very common notions of, some kind of safeguarded market economy. I also see a lot of potential between Europe and America and Africa. In fact, the next billion, digital and AI users will live in Africa. And so there's lots of potential there, but it's not going to work with just private sector, right? So we need to take the first step and then cooperate with government.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that response. All right, so we have one more question over there.
Thank you. Good morning, Professor. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk to you today about such interesting topics. So I'm curious about using technologies in education. So today we having such a wonderful world and modern world, we have a problem with the education in some areas in some countries. So there are some companies that are using technologies to provide the education by internet and so on. And of course, the question of providing access to education is the question of the government, the question of the regulation. But can we do some collaboration? I mean, the collaboration of the private sector, businesses, and the government to pursue this education, providing access for all nations, for all people, whatever they are staying in or they're living in, for the improving the literacy level.
Yeah. Look, I mean, my immediate answer is sort of knee-jerk is we better do that, right? Because we are seeing an education crisis. We're seeing this around the world. We're seeing this everywhere. And, and so the answer is we have to figure this out. Government, like I said, has to be in the mix. And I very much, by the way, applaud you for this platform because, we need business leaders everywhere. But of course, like you young ones here now, to really look beyond the edge of the plate that is just your product and your business model, okay? Look toward society, look toward current issues, look toward geoeconomics, geopolitics, geotech, and that's exactly what you're doing, right? So getting back to the main point is, yes, but we have to, so we are in desperate need for innovative new solutions, and the ones we have right now are not enough. The established university system around the world is hurting because it is underfunded, and it also takes an industrial revolution era approach to education, right? Why are we still teaching with 70 people in a room? Well, that goes for certain inspiring lectures, right, like keynotes or short format, 15, 20 minutes an hour, right? But that should not be the core of teaching. I need to get to the individual. I need to pick you up where you are, meaning, where are you cognitively, emotionally, intellectually? I need to be able to customize approaches, and we don't have methods to do that. And that's what's hurting us right now, right? So we got a swift kick in the pants, as we say, right, in terms of now driving a hybrid model here at HULT where, yes, it's still primarily based in person, but you do have the option to do Zoom, and we all need to get used to more of that. And we also know that Zoom is vastly imperfect.
Yeah.
It's not the same experience. The metaverse might provide some relief, but if we go with the conversation we just had, that's 10 years out. It's like, I need something now, okay? We're now here at HULT and elsewhere experimenting with virtual reality experiences. We need to put more money into this. Private sector-driven solutions with oversight by the government. We call this experimentation sandboxes, right, where people can experiment with controlled populations, right? There's government observing, what are the side effects, right? But then often you discover, well, they're pretty benign. Let's scale it out. That's what we need in education more than anything else. And then this whole job scare is also going to go away, right? But the current approach is just doing Zoom-based learning or these MOOCs, massively online scalable systems. They aren't the answer yet. And really putting people through 4-year basic college degrees is not feasible anymore either.
Yeah.
Too much physical infrastructure that burdens everything down. Right, and but going purely virtual is also not the answer. How do you start socializing? Right, a large part of education is the human connections. It's literally growing up with each other, learning from each other. When I teach, right here at HULT, I love it because I see 50 in the classroom. I see 30, 40, 50 live movies in front of me. Right? Those are all your lives, right? And I'm so privileged to be able to tap into that and accompany you and coach you and give you what you need to the best I can, right? We need to make sure that we focus on those individual movies more. And there is no, currently, 4-year college, the way it is structured, is not the answer, right? But how do we accomplish that? Because the interaction between all of you is as important as your interaction with me.
Absolutely. I mean, I must say it's an exciting time to be alive, with everything you said. Apparently, we can only just take one more question. So I saw his hand, so please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Olaf, for being here. It's really great, and thank you, BCA, for organizing this. It's been a great, insightful chat. My question relates to access. With the fourth industrial revolution taking place, it is the greatest opportunity to provide access, and it can be the greatest polarizer as well. As we know, we're not all at that equal playing field. And so related to that, are we moving too fast? Should we stop and think about how do we tap into the potential that we're losing out on? There are still places in the world that don't have access to the internet, and we're talking about the metaverse. So are there some strategies that we should focus on first, address those, and then, or can we do this together?
Yeah.
What are some ways?
I don't think, it's another great question, right? I don't think slowing down is the answer. Are we going too fast for people that are being left behind? Yes. But we should not slow down. We should speed them up, okay? What does that mean? It means that we have to enable people to jump on that train as it is leaving the station. I'm working with, strategists, with designers, with ethics architects in corporations, in many places that are saying, look, actually, if you hire the right people into a product development process, you can safeguard it and get human centricity, ethics, social responsibility into these product designs. You don't actually need to slow down because most of the time it's really just safeguards, monitoring, right? And if we're in the process early, we don't need to slow any entrepreneur down. Every once in a while, we will stop or slow a process down, but then it's a fallacy to think that that's a negative because you would have hit a wall later anyway with public opinion with what we call techlash, where people are saying stop what you're doing, then you get lawsuits or you get a heavy-handed regulator who says stop it right here, stop it right, and you're dead in the water, right? And then that's a major slowdown, right? So I think slowing down per se is not the goal. It's bringing people onto that train, right, and making sure that that's a design choice, okay? That's really the answer. And I think, frankly, Africa, out of all places, has taught us that, Africa can leapfrog, but it needs the enablement, right, for, various payment solutions that needed mobile infrastructure. But it didn't need a lot of landline infrastructure, right? So now what do we do with all this young talent in Africa and elsewhere that is not currently on that train to get them on that train in a locally respectful way and in a human-centric way? And there are plenty of ways to do this, right? And it goes back also to your other question about ethical principles, right? Look, I mean, we're always talking about ethical principles on this 30,000-foot level. But what an entrepreneur needs is operationalized ethics, meaning what are my operational safeguards? Tell me exactly what to do in my product or solution design process that will safeguard me here on this meta level, not on the highfalutin principles level. We can all agree at some point, or we don't, but that's bad in and of itself. But once you get down to like the experiment, the product, the solution, the community, right, the actual stakeholder lives, people are trying to, people can then project sort of, what do I do every day? Is it really that bad? Or actually, this is pretty cool, right? And people get over humps with each other much more quickly, and it's much more concrete. That's where we need to go with people to get them on that wagon and not, slowing down is the wrong target function, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your question. Honestly, I think we should maybe book you for a whole day to have conversations about this and, take all the questions everyone's seated here. But because of the time period for this event, we would have to sort of round up in a couple of minutes now, and of course we have to respect your timing as well. But just before we wrap this up, I'd like you to tell us your upcoming book, which I believe will be launched in Q1 of 2023. How can we stay connected to more information about your book? How can we connect, with you, and of course the viewers who will be watching this as well? How can they get connected to you and probably purchase a copy of your book?
Oh, well, thank you. I hope you all will, because it's a great book. But I have to be humble, right? So the book is, the draft is with MIT Press, and they have a peer review process, and it's blind, so we have to get through that. So let's not count our blessings just yet. And I'm sure Mark and Terrence and also Dan will agree with that. But yeah, because of, and this is interesting, right? Because of supply chain issues with paper and all kinds of other things in the global economy, and COVID, of course, holding up production, it's not going to be out till 1Q of next year. But when it is out, it'll be out in paper format, but also in digital and hopefully in audio format, and hopefully be available internationally. Our first book was available is available in China, Japan, Korea, and of course the United States, but not yet in Europe and other places. This new book hopefully will be available in more places at affordable prices and formats, right? And if you want to stay up to speed, then follow us, Mark, Terrence, and me on LinkedIn, I'm also, as of late, active on Instagram. But LinkedIn is probably the central point.
Yeah,
and
sorry to cut you. I think you should tell us your Instagram handle, because I know we would like to connect with you on Instagram.
So on Instagram and Twitter, I am at Olaf, OLAF, and then my last name, GROTH, SF, for San Francisco, okay? And then we'll also probably be doing podcasts and promoting the book, come April or May. So you'll see the podcast. We might be doing a podcast series with some of the people we interviewed in the book. We interviewed about 80 to 100 people, and some very senior people and very cool thinkers. So we hope to bring you those in podcast format maybe as well. We'll have to see, right?
Absolutely. Well, honestly, I could be here all day speaking to Dr. Groth, but apparently we have to wrap up today's episode of BCA Chat. Thank you so much, Dr. Groth. Thank you so much, Pariksha. Do you have some closing words just before I wrap it up?
Yeah, once again, I'm actually reading Professor Olaf's Solomon Code. I recommend all of you to buy it because it's got amazing insights and it just opens your mind. As what Professor actually said, we are the future. So getting mentored by professors like Olaf is a blessing in disguise. That's all I can say.
Really appreciate that. And here's the tax I'm going to extol, because I need to very clearly now make myself look a lot better here. Because, look at you with all that bling and him. And of course, I'm butchering this now, but you can help me after the show, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to you, our live audience. Thank you so much for being a part of today's episode, for being a part of today's show. We hope to see you in subsequent episodes of BCA Chat. Stay tuned to more information. Follow us on Instagram at BCA Think Tank, on LinkedIn, and of course on Facebook. I am proud and pleased to be your host, Oluwatobi Oladeko. Thank you, and see you next time.
But we hope to see you here for the next one.